Good morning, everyone.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. I was joking with Tarik earlier that he looks a little bit like a candy striper, and I don't think he got the reference. So we're starting off strong this morning.
Yeah, I don't know what that means. Born in Morocco, so we don't really celebrate Valentine's Day there, but I'm trying to acculturate and assimilate, so to say.
Well, clearly we both have our colors on to represent, right?
I was paid by Polo to wear this, so...
Branding. So we should probably introduce ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you want me to go first?
Go
no,
for
ladies
it.
first. It's
Ladies
Valentine's
first?
Day.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you. So chivalrous. So everyone, hi. I'm Leia Charnin. I'm a psychologist here at Southeast Psych and excited to be speaking with...
Tarik Sloussi, also known as Tarik Sloussi by many people. But
by
it
no
is
one.
actually Tarik. You know, everyone calls me Tarik Sloussi, actually, believe it or not. But I have this thing, I don't like to correct people just because I think there's more important things like interacting, so I don't like to waste time correcting people. So
I don't know. I think there's a lot in a name though, and like
that's
saying
for
it
some
correctly.
People. A lot of people get triggered by that, but no,
I'm one of those people. I think
Tarik, whatever.
Because I get Leia really often, or my last name is one letter away from being the toilet paper brand, Charmin. So, so I'm like, I don't know how I feel like
Leia Charnin.
Leia Charnin. It's Charmin. So I don't know how I feel about being associated with toilet paper. So yeah, right.
Tarik Slushy. I've been associated with slushies before, so.
Well, everybody likes sweet slushies. And speaking of sweetness.
So yeah, Tarik Sloussi. I'm a licensed professional counselor here at Southeast Psych in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's where our studios are today. Yep. And we got our producer, Brandon. What's your last name again?
Gage.
Brandon Gage. The sad thing is I've known Brandon forever. I just know him as 12 Gauge. That's his nickname. So don't know his actual last name. But it's Gage. In case
it's Gage. I sometimes want to call it Cage because I feel like he traps me.
If we're doing
my God!
We got a camera right now over here.
Kidding.
If we're messing up names, for the longest time, people would just say Brandon Cage, and then they just go Nicolas Cage, and then they would just
there you go.
go down that rabbit hole.
Right? Yeah.
That's hilarious. So what are we talking about today? I know this is a special morning show episode. It's a holiday.
Absolutely. Beautiful. It is a holiday. So I love that we were actually just talking about names because that is also a part of our identity, right? So we're going to be talking a bit about Dwayne Wade and the information and their support about their daughter because their daughter has come out recently as a trans female. So we're going to talk about identity and development and Dwayne Wade and how to support people in love and connection because it's Valentine's Day, right? And so we really want to talk about love in all of its forms and not just this kind of one small form of it's just romantic love or this is a day to like for marketing or right like why is love important and then related to love online dating because right like,
which both of us have experience with, right?
We do.
So we'll share some personal experience as well, but we're going to hit from the clinical health or clinical mental health lens as well, so we'll hit it from different angles, psychology and pop culture together. So and then last but not least we will be covering, do you remember our third and final topic?
Wait. Love, D-Wade.
Oh, that is it.
Was that a pop quiz? Like,
It's a trick question, guys. I did that
started off strong, y'all. So
yeah, love and online dating is two separate things. I thought that was one. So
yeah, it's gonna be fluid. So anyway,
because that's where my love lasts. It's online. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So first, I want to ask you, Leia. How do you define love? Like, what is your definition of love?
Yeah. So I'm going to start off by saying the ongoing joke with my friends is I'm a total sap. Like, I am this person who deeply feels my connections. And that's how I think about love, like an appreciation, a deep connection with other humans. It's a space in which we can be uniquely ourselves and feel accepted and that appreciation. So that is oftentimes when I most feel love with the people around me. What about for you, Tarik?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
So I think you've gotten to know me pretty well over our time working together. I'm a therapist, so mental health psychology is a realm in which my brain processes things.
Sure.
But philosophy is a very close second for me. So it's a tough question because I think love is very philosophical in my world. So I think of love as yes, connectedness, but I think of the unconditional aspect of it.
Yeah.
So that's the piece. It's not a connection that's just short. Like when I think about true love, I think about unconditional. I think about familial dynamics, but then think about another person that you can't live without per se. So that's the way that I define love. It's a feeling at its core, but it's something that's unconditional. So
Yeah. And so with unconditional, like I think about also acceptance.
exactly.
Right?
100%.
Like who you are, you can show that person the other person, and when you share like unconditional love, they know you on all sides, right? Like people see me as this happy-go-lucky kind of chipper person, but the people who really are close and intimate in my life know me when I'm grumpy or short or like not at our best, and they still say, I'm here for you, I love you, I accept who you are as a human, and
in all aspects. Yeah. Which brings me like to like the psychology angle and like love languages. I'm sure you're familiar with the love. I think every therapist has learned about love languages. So are you familiar with the 5 love languages? I'm assuming you are. And if so, do you know what your love language is?
Okay, I have to share. I really struggle with the construct of love languages.
Ooh,
so we're gonna get into a little bit of a debate.
Please go for it. I want to hear
controversial. Okay. The 5 love languages. Let's see if we can remember all 5. Acts of kindness or acts of service. So you're giving.
Gift giving.
Gift giving. That was the second one.
Positive affirmations.
This is rusty for me.
Yeah, no, you got to bring it back up.
Yeah, right.
So we got gift giving, acts of service.
Affirmations, so giving verbal affection, and
physical touch.
That's right.
Physical
quality
touch.
time,
and quality
right?
time.
Yep. Okay, togetherness, great. So I think it's a little limited. Like,
ooh,
that's my controversial perspective on it. I think there are other ways to say that, to share love, and so to just say like, oh, I'm only acts of service, because I think sometimes people talk about it in just more limited ways, but many of us fall into different categories. Right? Like, or in different relationships, like I might want more physical touch from my romantic partner, or I might want more like quality time with my friends. And so I think we just speak about this topic a little
but I think from a true like clinical lens or what it was meant for is it's not that you have one love. I think that is a big myth and a misconception. That you have a love, my love language is physical touch and that's it. Like, no, that just means it's one that's more than the others potentially. Some people have more of a balanced love language where they have multiple that are pretty close to one another. So I think that's a big way in which society misinterprets the love language theory, but really it's that. I think those are general things. Would you say there's another theme that we're missing, or do you think those are broad enough to cover ways in which we can receive love?
Yeah, and I think maybe there are more sub themes, like, can we truly be like vulnerable and authentic with people? And so how does that fall in? Or
so vulnerability sounds like trust, sounds like, which one would it fall under?
Intimacy.
Affirmation. Affirmation is more of an act than it. Okay, I can see where you're going with that.
Yeah, like really sharing of ourselves. Is that, I don't know how that falls in, but those are things that I really.
That's a good argument. I see where you're going with that.
I just really value that in my relationships, right? And I value that in love and how I define it.
And is that quality time? Is that
maybe?
But again, quality time is so broad. I see where you're at.
Yeah.
So do you have? So it sounds like that's the one for you. I think for me, believe it or not, I think this is interesting because I kind of explored this many years ago, and I think the masculinity complex in men and love languages, it can be tough, but I think words of affirmation are important to me, and I think most guys struggle to admit that they don't need the reinforcement, that it's like, but it's good. I feel loved when someone confirms things for me and affirms things for me. So I think that's a big one for me. Quality time would be my close second, kind of like, it's not just the one. Quality time. It's not just like quantity of time. I don't need a lot of time with someone. When I'm with them, it's the undivided attention, it's the connection, it's the true, authentic, deep connections and relationships and conversations and things of that sort.
So you don't want somebody like on their phone, like,
no,
right? Like,
no, not at all.
Right, like they're truly listening and saying
connecting.
Our time together is important.
Yeah.
And then that word, like the affirmation, what would that sound like for you? Like
it's very subtle too. It doesn't have to. It can be, hey, I really appreciate you doing that, or I noticed this about you, or I noticed, like, it really is. It's not like this big, hey, you're a really great person. It's not it really is, hey, thank you for thinking about me when you did that. Like, it's very subtle in nature. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I think one thing that I would add to that is I think the big misconception, like in couples counseling, for example, is that, you talk about love languages and it's just like, okay, this is the person's love language. Most often, especially as men, we tend to give love in the ways in which we receive love. And I think not just as men, I think men and women do it, but
We
tend to see
focus
it
on
more
that.
often in my office because I work with men primarily. So it's like we tend to focus on, hey, this is the way that I give love, so therefore I'm giving that. So for guys, it's like security, I'm providing, that may not be the way that your significant other receives love. Maybe they need words of affirmation, or they need quality time, or they need, and that's the biggest piece I feel like with couples therapy is working through that and understanding your partners or your significant others' love language. Because if you understand it, then you can give them love in the way in which they receive it, and that's kind of the meeting each other halfway. It may not come natural to you, so you have to put some work into that.
Do you think, or actually, I'm not as familiar in the research on this, maybe you are, but do you think that love languages are static? Or do they change as we developmentally change over life and we have experiences, or the relationship changes, or what do you think about that?
Really good question.
Yeah.
So my philosophical brain kind of working there. I don't like when people try to pick a cop out and say I think it's both kind of scenario.
Depends. Yeah, right.
So for me, it's like which one do I lean a little bit more towards? I think it's more static than it is fluid, and the reason why is I think it's not something that's like conscious. I feel like it's subconscious. It's environmental. It's things that you've experienced that have shown you that you need this kind of connection. So we are a product of our environment more than we are a product of nature, and maybe that's my philosophical and psychological lens on resiliency and change. So I do think we can change, but I think at our core we are a product of our environment unless we have the conscious awareness to change it. So it's yes, it's both, but I lean more towards static.
Actually, this is bringing up like some attachment theory stuff for me.
Exactly.
Like, and so that is early relationships, like how we bond, what we receive from our nurturing relationships, like parent figures, or other peers, family members, right? And so that's coming up for me right now. We learned this so early that it becomes something very internalized in terms of what we need, like words of affirmation or physical touch. Especially if we don't have much of that when we're younger, like we might crave that.
Yes.
So that makes a lot of sense to me, actually.
Yeah.
That
kind of brings up like radical attachment disorder, rad kids, and things of that sort. It's lack of physical and connectedness and attachment, and therefore you may seek it in different ways and unhealthy ways, and much deeper into the mental health lens. Schedule a session if you're interested in digging deeper into something.
Yeah, we just went down a rabbit hole with theory, so nerding out, y'all. So we're talking about a couple of different things, right? We're talking about love, and especially when we're talking about love languages, like it sounded like we were talking a lot about romantic relationships and when we're talking about couples. And I really want to validate that, especially on Valentine's Day and the anniversary dates and holidays. Sometimes it's really hard if we feel like we're alone or we've experienced loss, or there can be a lot of complicated emotions that come up around these kinds of dates and celebrations.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I think about that, and then I also think about how we think about love in mostly a romantic sense, kind of stereotypically. And love can just be in so many different types of relationships and forms. And that one of the bigger predictions or factors for mental health wellness, right, and health is leaning into our relationships, leaning into love and connection in different forms. And it doesn't just have to be romantic.
For sure. Yeah, right? I think you hit on a lot there.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
But all that is relevant for me in my personal experience. So you've talked about kind of the other side of it, with love and pain kind of being close cousins. For me, it's like the grief stuff. So some people, for Valentine's Day, it may not be a positive association, right? It may be more of a negative association because they're missing someone whom they love, whether significant other or family member or friend. And then I think about how we're socialized, and again, the masculinity complex. From a personal perspective, I lost my dad in April, so I've been dealing with grief and trying to process all that and feelings that come with that, and then I've been kind of approaching life a little bit differently, trying to kind of more of an existential, what is the meaning of life? When you lose someone, it's my first person that I've ever lost that's been close to me. So for me, it's kind of been a shock and also a very reflective time for me where I'm thinking about, hey, what really matters in this world, like kind of the existential, what is the meaning of this life, when these people can be taken away at any moment. And then you got the Kobe Bryant scenario where that's impacted my entire social circle, because as an athlete myself, I still play sports regularly, and all these group chats that I'm a part of where we play pickup basketball or I play flag football, and all these guys are texting about this and sharing true authentic feelings and emotions about all this. It's really leading to a level of vulnerability there. But for me, the takeaway for me is, as a result of all that, I've tried to acknowledge relationships and tell my friends that I love them
Yeah.
and not leave any stone unturned, because when it's all said and done, there's nothing you can do when it's done. So what can you be doing now so that you can manage post, because we don't the fragility of life. I think that's what the Kobe Bryant scenario really brought to a lot of people. Is the fragility of life. He was 41 years old. He had a long career ahead of him in his second act, and it was just gone. And then you talk about his 13-year-old daughter, and I think that was it was a very interesting experience for me. I don't mean to be long-winded, but it was a very interesting experience because I've been going through the grief with my dad. But seeing that on such a large scale, it was like the whole world was grieving and everyone was experiencing. I felt this connection with the world, where all of my peers were feeling these feelings that I've been feeling, and it felt oddly connected. Yeah. So, sorry about that. Totally.
No. I mean, this is like that beautiful piece of a personal story of being vulnerable, of learning about someone, right? And that you're talking about themes of noticing people really remembering that our connections are precious and fragile, and how do we just appreciate it in the moment, right? And I think a lot about that, because we can get so caught up like in the day, in our work, or like the things we need to do, and we sometimes just kind of neglect nurturing relationships, right? Like I think about at the end of the day, I'm a little like grumpy and shut down and I need a little time, and then like at what point do I re-engage and connect to the people that are really important to me? And I have to kind of sometimes consciously remind myself to do that. But I think what you're talking about with fragility, and when we see that and we're reminded of it, it does kind of shake us more awake to do that, right? And
whether we want to or not, it really can shock our world, because it's just, the fragility of life. It's everyone knows it, but when it happens, it's just different. And honestly, the irony in all this is I am a grief counselor. I know what there is to know about grief, but when you experience it firsthand, there's just no way to really grasp it until you've experienced it firsthand to that extent, especially with a close, significant family member or loved one or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. So. I think an important piece about that grief, and I think about that too in my clinical work, is when that intense sadness comes up and loss, it also has this duality with we are feeling sad because we're missing, because we felt that connection, because we felt love. Like, can we lean into that appreciation too? This coexists, right? Like there's sadness and loss and missing, and it's also an opportunity to appreciate, like with your dad, that you had that beautiful relationship. And
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
So
we just brought the mood down. We'll try to come back up.
We just got real, but again, I think that's
good.
And that's something I always appreciate about my conversations with Tarik, because we can go like really just real and that's why we're talking right now. Words of affirmation. So I appreciate our conversations.
That makes
Tarik.
me feel loved. Thank you.
Absolutely. So love is we're talking about like how busy life is. I'm gonna kind of transition into our next topic with online dating, right? Like life is busy. We feel disconnected sometimes, yet at our core we really oftentimes want to feel connected, and in a romantic sense. And so it's really fascinating to look at the past. I don't know, online dating has been like more of a thing in the past decade or so. Like I think my first experience going online dating was about 2009. So that's been about 10 years for me.
Yeah, it's actually been a little longer than that. 95 is when the first online dating website came about.
Do you know what the first online dating website was?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I did do the research, but I don't want to misspeak, so don't quote me on it.
That's okay. But, no fact checkers here.
There was a Harvard student that came up with a dating app, and it was something similar to one of the apps that are familiar, or not app, but website. Right. But it's familiar. It sounds like something like, I don't know. Does our producer know off the top of his head?
It wasn't. I don't know the name, but it was like a bulletin board.
Exactly.
It wasn't. It was like, so you can like post like looking for so and so. Yeah.
So. So it's been around for a little while, but it's evolved, and I got some interesting data statistics.
Let's nerd out
are just
with that.
Shocking, and I kind of looked at some facts and statistics.
Yeah.
So did you know that 40 million Americans use online dating today? Mm-hmm. So that is. I think 40 million people are on online dating.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm just going to rattle off some of these, and then we can elaborate on any of them that are relevant to you and I.
Go for it.
So 53% of individuals lie on their online dating profiles.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Age.
Yeah, so
here are the things they lie about.
Yeah.
Age, weight, height, and income work/job are the 3 most common areas for made-up tales.
For made-up tales, yep. Okay. Do you have more?
I do. But what are your thoughts on that? I guess because I have some thoughts on that because I've heard from female friends of mine that they'll go on a date with a guy, and it's the most common one. It's like height. He said he was 5'11", but he's really 5'8".
Right. Oh my goodness. So I was just thinking, so we were just talking about love and authenticity and like really genuinely being you.
This is the total opposite.
And we're starting off a relationship with a lie. That's going to be strong, right? So yeah, like you're immediately starting off in that context of feeling like lied to and, you know,
so,
like, right,
but 53% of individuals lie. So think about it. You and I have been on online. So the odds say that one of us have lied on our dating app.
Have you lied to me? No, wait.
It's totally Tarik.
It's totally Tarik, right?
I have not. I have nothing to hide, honestly.
But I also think this talks to societal norms, stereotypes, the kinds of things that we feel like we have to be, right? This is all about social pressure too. So I think about with men that society more so says like men who are tall, and there's actually research that does support this, that women, if we're talking about straight heterosexual attraction, women tend to perceive men who are taller as more physically attractive or fertile or like whatever that is, right? And so I think about this in terms of like gender stereotypes and how our society shapes that, and then shapes this idea of, okay, I have to lie in order to even be able to get in, right? In order to have an opening opportunity.
Yep.
It's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, no, it is.
Right?
It is. So let's hit some others.
Go for it.
1 in 5 online daters have asked someone else to help write or review their profile.
Ooh, I did that.
I was gonna say, I did too. So we both agree to that one.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
One of my friends, who's a colleague here also, has helped me develop my profile. I'm like, hey, help me out. Is this, as a girl who uses online dating apps, is this something that makes sense? Is there anything I could tweak? She switched some of my pictures up. She switched some of my questions that I answered.
Or why is it so weird to talk about myself? Like, how do I like not know adjectives or ways to describe me? Or like it sounded too canned, or and I didn't want to do like the loves walks on the beach and like
long walks on the beach.
Yeah, right. I like pina coladas, right? Yeah. So it's like, how do we represent ourselves in a really, really short context? Like, and what struck me about apps now in particular, because back in the day when I first was online dating, I used Match, and they have like longer sections, paragraphs. It has more availability to give information about yourself. Now apps really don't have much text. Like, you're not writing much. And so how do you really portray yourself in 3 sentences and some pictures? Yeah. It's really limited. Yeah.
Even in sentences, I feel like they're being done away with. It's like really answer 3 questions.
Bullet point. Yeah.
And it really is and you're talking about Match, which is a more rigorous process than a Tinder or Bumble or Hinge or Grindr or the other applications that exist. So let's keep rolling. So
sure. Go
20% of those in current committed relationships began online. And 7% of marriages in 2015 were between couples that met on a dating website. So I think that's kind of the positive side of it is people are developing relationships that are lasting and turning into marriage and evolve. One of my closest friends, he was never a dating app guy. Yeah. And then he met his significant other through a dating app, and now his perspective on it has changed. I kind of talked him into doing it at first, and he said, thanks so much. And then but I'm still single and he's married. Like, what is that about?
You're like, can I get something universe here? Yeah, no, right? No, I mean, honestly, the last 2 committed relationships I was in, I met online, because I think also you're just introduced to people that you wouldn't otherwise meet, and like with different backgrounds. And so actually there are statistics to support people who meet online have more diversity. So in terms of like diversity of dating, interracial, or having different types of religion, or even thinking about like professional interests, there's more diversity within that interaction and opportunity with online dating to find people who have different mindsets, or and that can be a really interesting component to connect to somebody. For sure. Yeah. So
last data point, and then we'll switch to pros and cons, and then anything else you want to say.
Go for it, yeah.
So the last one is the online dating industry as a whole, annual revenue of over $1.9 billion.
Billion?
So this is a cash cow.
Man.
So there's definitely money in the online dating
And I've paid
world.
into that freaking system.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Wow, that's my
last one. I'm sorry. This one kind of piggybacks. I just have to share this last one.
Go for it.
The United States alone has 2,500 dating sites, and about 1,000 new sites are launched every year. So we just know about the top 10 and most popular.
Yeah.
But there are dating sites. Everyone wants a piece of this 1.9 billion.
Right.
So it is an industry. Spring Take Dating app coming soon.
Developed by psychologists for you. You know what? I think that's probably already like.
No, I think we just got a business idea.
All right, cut the stream.
Right. So that being said, so the statistics you just listed, like there's so much out there. There's even evidence and research on like teen dating, and also especially within this current generation, they're so used to talking online or texting or whatever, and so there is a lot of even like teens going online to date and meet and thinking about that texting. It does reduce some of the anxiety of like meeting face to face, and it creates some anonymity. And so that you brought up some of the data points I was going to go into.
No, when you said the anonymity, that one got me. It's the catfishing.
Yeah.
Which terminology? We'll get to terminologies too. I've got some terminologies that are common in the dating app world. But have you ever been catfished?
I've never been catfished, fortunately. I do think I have a pretty good sense of screening, but I'm someone who like I really talk to somebody a bit online, and then like we exchange the number, and then we like talk for a minute, for a bit. So I ask a lot of personal questions, and I look for things like, are they asking me questions? Are they curious and interested genuinely in me? Right. So there's certain things that, and like initial shared values that like I'm gonna talk about before.
I will tell you just based on the research that I've done about best practices, you're already hitting a lot of the main points regarding best practices for online dating to be successful. It's asking inquisitive questions and trying to develop the relationship. It's not meeting right away. It's kind of trying to feel it out, asking the right hobbies, interests. Are we compatible? And then taking it there. So
we've talked about like time is precious, right? And so am I really gonna I do thoroughly love my friends. I have a beautiful, rich social life. So am I really gonna take out a night to meet up with somebody that it might not really be worth like a good conversation or like really worth my time, right? So there's that. But also for me, it's a matter of establishing some kind of trust. Like I can go out with this person in public and still feel safe, right? And that is some of the statistics. More women, especially younger women, have experienced negative experiences with online dating. Overall, 6 out of 10 reported positive, and so that's pretty good, right? But especially younger women, like early 20s, have experienced like explicitly sexual messages, or when they say they're not interested, they continue to receive messages, and that is something I've experienced where I very clearly said not interested, and they continue to be like, oh, come on, like you seem fun, or messages that are just not welcomed. And so that can create a really negative experience, at least speaking from a woman's perspective, because we're trying to create a boundary and that's not respected.
No, I do think one thing that is good about dating apps is they allow you to just
you can block
get rid of someone really quickly. So I think that is a feature that I think is a response to some of these things. One interesting thing is 35% of guys, the research shows, swipe right on Tinder to all of their matches. To any, not their matches, all of the people that pop up on their screen.
Yeah.
Swipe right. So it's they call it like swipe roulette. One of my friends was doing this.
I haven't heard that.
Oh, swipe roulette. I'm sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
Oh, yeah.
Swipe roulette.
Man, I took French and I totally missed that. Continue.
Roulette.
Yeah,
roulette. That's Italian. No, we missed it. What are you doing, man? You're messing us up there. So what else do you have on dating apps and online dating? I have a lot more, but also for the sake of time, we want to make sure we save time for D Wade.
For D Wade, yeah, totally. Well, okay, we were talking about pros and cons of online dating, but we were also talking about best practices. Do we want to go maybe best practices for online dating, like tips?
Okay. What do you
Let's
got
talk
for
about
us?
that.
Do you have?
Okay, so we just spoke about asking questions. We spoke about shared values. So that's something to me is like, okay, I know that someone who has strong relationships, someone who is open and curious and willing to share hard times in their lives, so that's vulnerability for me that I'm looking for, right? Willing to share their emotions and really be open in that way. And of course, not right off the bat. We all have to titrate and kind of manage that, right?
Sure.
I'm not immediately like, tell me about the saddest experience in your life in the first 5 minutes. But those are some things that I really look for and think have created some positive initial dates. Like, honestly, I have never had a terrible first date. So
congratulations, you're one of the few. Because I mean,
many people, right? right. Like, I'm not like, look, I mean, have they not gone past the first date? Yes, but for different reasons. Like, I never was like,
this was terrible.
This was like awful, right? So, and some friends have definitely shared some stories that were terrible. So, anyways,
it sounds like you've done your due diligence. So
I tried to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, good for you. So there's a couple of other pieces of advice. So one is, and then this may be more relevant to the male side of it, because again, as you said, they can be pushy because they have to stand out. That there's the research that shows also that women tend to get more matches than men because women are more selective. So we're actually fitting the stereotype in some regard. Like you're more patient, you're more selective, and guys are just like, she looks pretty or whatever. Just someone talk to me. So they say be patient is a big piece of advice for all that are a part of it. Be patient, right? And then don't get set on this idea of perfection is another one, because I think we have so many options. You have this buffet of diversity and different looks and sizes and skin color, tone, whatever it may be, personalities, styles. But don't get set in this box of like, I have so many options, so I have to find this perfect person. They can't have flaws. Like,
like I need this person who's exactly my age, 6 foot whatever, has like an over 100,000 income, like, right? Like, so if I were to do that, then I'd really limit my options, and so be flexible is what you're saying.
Exactly. And then one other one that kind of falls into kind of the due diligence is ask about intentions. And ironically, girls have asked me that in dating apps before, and I appreciate it. It's like, hey, here's my intention.
Same,
and also recognize that people are on websites for all different, or on apps for all different goals and aspirations and desires. Some are on there just to hook up. Some are on there for more long-term relationships. Ask the intentions. If it doesn't match up, it's not anything personal. It's just a difference of desire and goal.
Absolutely. And this speaks to knowing ourselves too, right? Knowing what we really want, what our boundaries are, and not to overextend that. We don't have to necessarily, right? Like knowing what your intentions are, what you want right off the bat, and that creates a lot of clarity for someone, right? So yeah.
Good.
Cool.
So much more we could talk. I feel like we could have done a whole episode, and it's only Valentine's Day.
Love and all that. So here's, this has really stood out to me as a therapist who's worked a lot with diversity and inclusion issues. Particularly, I've provided training for individuals who are supporting and allies to individuals in the LGBTQIA community. And so one of the interesting facts to me with online dating is that individuals who identify as lesbian, gay, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex. These are all terms. Please look them up because it's so important to know what these terms mean. So if we meet someone who is of a gender expression and also sexual orientation that's different than ours, we can engage in a conversation that feels safe and open. So this is a long-winded way to say one of the statistics I read about online dating is individuals of that community are 2 times more likely to use online dating. And I think one of those aspects in looking at questionnaires is they can find someone who they know is this sexual orientation or of this gender identity that matches mine, and therefore I know I can date this person, right? Because otherwise it's a matter of how do I choose to disclose my sexual orientation or gender to someone. And so it's also kind of a safety piece where I know I can go out there and find someone who is open to dating me, right?
Ironically, from just personal experience, I've even seen some individuals who have normal profiles that will say in the bio trans woman, or so it's I think they're not just sticking to like, here's this application that's just for me, like Grindr or other forms that are developed, but it's, hey, I'm gonna go on Tinder, I'm gonna go on Bumble, or I'm gonna go on Hinge, and I'm just gonna put it out there because those people may be there too. So again, that goes back to like the intention. What are people there for? What are they looking for? You can find whatever you're looking for. It's just
Well, and I bring this up because I think about, again, having these open conversations about what identity is. And so this really came up with our next topic.
Dwayne Wade.
Dwayne Wade,
and
right?
Zaya is what his daughter is going by.
Absolutely.
Formerly known as Zion, but
Born Zion.
Born Zion, and is transitioning.
So Born Zion, male assigned at birth.
Yes.
Right?
Gender.
So right. So gender. And so that is a construct of at birth individuals or children, babies, right, are assigned, okay, well, this is the genitalia, typically is what we go by. It's also chromosomal, and they say, okay, you are a male, you are female. However, as someone grows up in life, they might feel really, really uncomfortable and like, this just does not fit, this does not belong, this is not who I am. And so with this case of Zaya, who is now transitioning trans female, that she does not feel male. That's not the person she is. And so imagine feeling trapped in this context of, I have to show the world and lie to the world about who I am, and that would feel, I can't imagine how that would feel. Like, I am cisgender. I do.
What is cisgender?
I was just about to say, yep. So I identify with the sex that was assigned to me at birth. So I was assigned female. I do identify with being a woman and female.
Got it.
Right?
That's cisgender.
That's cisgender, yep. So transgender, right, is
the opposite.
We don't. And I can only imagine how painful that is, to feel like you can't express truly who you are. Authenticity again, right? Yeah. And so with Zaya, what comes up for me is how Dwayne and his wife and like the parent
Gabrielle Union,
exactly, right, the parental response and
what we know from a mental health lens is that's vital.
Absolutely. And also thinking about how young Zaya is. Zaya's what, 12?
That's 12 years old. And I think that's the biggest question that even friends have asked me, like, do you even know? And I think some people are confusing trans with sexuality and asking about, well, how would that person, why are they even exploring sex? Well, no, gender versus sex is different. Would you agree with that construct?
How would you define those? Right. So sex relates to our organs. Gender is our gender, masculine, feminine, kind of, and also in between. So there can be like individuals who some days feel more female or male, and they express it that way. So this can actually be more fluid than just the two categories we even express it. So it's
very true.
It's a really nuanced conversation. And then within that context, we talk about pronouns. And so Zaya also is going by she, her, hers. And so that is a part of respecting, understanding the identity, the pronouns, using that. That's a way to share, I respect who you are and what you are, what your needs are. And I'm showing acceptance and love by listening to that. And I think there is peril in questioning, like, oh, you're so young, do you really know?
That's the question. That's the piece that I get from peers. And again, being in the sports world and being working with men, a lot of the questions that I tend to get are about those. And I can't help but to compare and connect this with the Kobe Bryant situation, because I feel like there's similarities in a different way. Where I'm going with this is, with the Kobe Bryant situation, it really has allowed men to be more vulnerable and share emotions that they would not have otherwise. So it's kind of shocked this world that we have in this sports world. And then you've got Dwayne Wade, another famous athlete, who's kind of shocked the world by accepting his daughter, who's born a son. And it's kind of like, so I think all of this, as much as we've evolved and changed, and we talk about this in the concept of racism and all of these things, there's still a lot of room to grow is what I'm recognizing here for all of us. And I think this is like, Dwayne Wade said this when he was on Ellen DeGeneres' show and announcing all of this. He mentioned that, this is going to be tough for his daughter, and how is she prepared for this? There was a little video he did while he was golfing with Zaya the other day, and he said, are you ready for all of what's going to come with this? And he said yes. And then there's the question of, does a 12-year-old can they fully conceptualize what's going to come with this? Are they prepared? And that's another question that people ask.
But society, so we're seeing this now as a 12-year-old coming out, right? I would put money down that Zion has been feeling this and knowing this about herself. Zaya, right? So we sometimes
gotta adjust.
Absolutely, and sometimes we slip up, and that's okay to own it. And so I own that I just slipped up, right?
You're fine.
So I'm gonna adjust, and that just to normalize that, right? So, but Zaya, I would put money down on the fact that she knew from a very, very young age. Like, I think about Nikki DeJagger just came out as a trans female, and she said that she knew from like age 6. And so this is something that I bet she has lived with for years, and that this is just public, and the family has really been trying to navigate it, I imagine, for quite some time now. And
no, I think you're spot on. I think when I think about the work that I've done as a mental health professional that works with individuals from a variety of walks of life, it's kind of what I would challenge people to do is the same that we challenge people to do with like race relations. It's interact with people of opposing races. Interact with people of the LGBTQ community, and the more you interact with them, the more you humanize them. The more you humanize them, the more you can empathize.
We're all human.
But if you're separate, so that's the thing for me. I think one thing that frustrates me is I think people are quick to jump to judgments, and if it doesn't fit my worldview, then it's wrong. And to me, I am a heterosexual male. it wasn't a choice that I made. So just because I don't understand why someone could be trans or could be gay or could be bisexual or could be questioning, doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's I didn't make a choice. It just was natural. So that could be natural. I can put myself conceptually put myself in that. And if that was the case, that's unfortunate that I'm in a body that doesn't fit what I feel. Like I feel for that individual in that regard.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think about that too. So you're just speaking about engaging. So opening up in conversation, perspective taking. There's actually research that does support the more that we engage with other humans, learn about them that are of different identities, the more our stereotype and biases, our implicit, unconscious biases, and even explicit, they reduce because we're learning,
Naturally,
right?
yeah.
It's natural. So it's exposure. I also really encourage individuals to go out and do some research. So that way when you're entering this conversation, you have a baseline foundation of knowledge because it helps the other person feel like you're truly trying to understand or really open to learning, and we're not putting the burden on another person to explain everything.
Yes. Right? And I think about my experience, like what I shared with you guys earlier about grief and about Kobe Bryant, how he's impacting all these individuals, and Dwayne Wade, and how we're having these conversations. Yeah. So to me, it's like sometimes we have to. We're not going to do that research unless it's relevant to something we're doing because of opportunity costs. You know, I have work to do. I have things, but it's like, hey, when this thing comes and it's trending, then it leads to conversations, and then that may lead to research. But I think the D Wade situation and the Zaya situation brings the topic to the forefront. Therefore, some people may do more research, but I think generally speaking, people do research on things that are relevant to them or something they need in the moment. So I think this is all good because it brings conversation, it brings understanding, it brings research, it brings.
This is an opportunity, right?
Exactly.
And so it brings it to have this conversation and absolutely
come out of the shadows, right? It's like, being able to discuss it.
And at the end of the day, this is all about love, connection, unconditional acceptance and regard, right? Like we might not none of us walk the same paths, yet we can try to step into that empathy and see the human for who they are, appreciate them.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and I think one piece that kind of speaks to that is a rapper by the name of The Game. He's from Los Angeles. He came out recently and did a little video after D Wade kind of announced all this with Zaya. And D Wade did say, I'm announcing this because Zaya is young and we don't want to put her in the front of all this. And she will own it as she comes of age. But as her parent, I'm going to manage this for the time being as far as the public eye. Sure. But The Game came out and really normalized it in the sense of saying, hey, I have kids. The more you have kids, he said, I was ignorant when I was younger. And I said, if my kid was ever this, I would not allow it. I would do something about it. I'd beat it out of him or her in a sense. Like, again, the old ignorant perspective. But he said at the end of the day, like, I respect D Wade for what he's doing because that's his child. And there's nothing like the love. And let's go back to what you're saying about love. At the end of the day, it's unconditional. Like we talked about earlier. So if it's truly unconditional, you're going to love your kid no matter what. And I think that's hard to argue, and that's where we can humanize and go back. That's your child.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, so what we also want to provide to everyone out there are ways to promote connection, conversations, and openness, right? And so I think we've touched base on this. How do we ask open questions to say that I am genuinely interested in what you are sharing? Maybe I don't fully understand exactly what you've gone through, yet I understand what fear feels like. I understand what love and connection and sadness. So if we can really connect on this common emotional space, that can create opportunity to really open up, right?
Research shows that people prefer, whether they have a disability, whether they are struggling with sexual identity, they'd rather you ask them than to make assumptions.
Right?
So that's exactly it. Have the conversation, ask in an inquisitive fashion rather than a judgmental sense. So that's definitely one piece of advice we would like to leave our viewers with. Absolutely. Anything else that you'd like to leave our viewers with from today? I know we covered a lot. We covered love, online dating, and then the D Wade situation with Zaya.
Really what I would like to encourage everyone to do is think about each day, how do you nurture connection in some way, right? Is that sending a text for, hey, I really appreciated this conversation we had. Someone dear to me just recently sent that. He said, hey, I really appreciate this conversation we had the other day and our connection, and it was just enjoyable. And it was like warm fuzzies, right? So each day we can do something small to lean into our connections, and it doesn't have to be, we're here for an hour having a conversation. It can be just sending a wet message, or really saying, I'm looking forward to seeing you this weekend, or something like that. Doing a small act of kindness, like I made chocolate covered strawberries for my mom, or which I did.
Acts of service, right there. Look at that, love language.
Just something small each day, because we also reap the benefits of that by feeling that connection, and it's a protective factor for our health, right?
Great.
What
So
about
we have I'll answer that question, but we have a couple of questions. Our
yes.
producer is giving me a little nod over
We
there.
have 2 questions, both from Facebook. The first one is from our friend Blake Smith.
Hi, Blake.
And Blake said, if 2 people have fundamentally different love languages, does that naturally cause a rift in the relationship?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
It's a really good question. I
I'm
think
into it.
to answer the question on face value, yes, it can and will cause a rift. The question is, are you willing to work through it, and are you willing to try to meet each other in the middle, or is it a stalemate where it's like, no, you have to do this way or not? Is there anything you would add to that?
I would agree. Yeah. I mean, I don't think it has to cause a rift, though. Like, it depends on how much we're saying, okay, this person is important to me, and I know that you really thrive on words of affirmation. We have to dig into that a little bit to understand what that means to each person. But if we're willing to really connect to someone and give that, then it takes work, though. So I think, does it have to create a rift, or maybe it creates it takes energy?
I think you make a very good point. I think it only creates a rift if the other person doesn't have a desire to meet that person's love language or the way in which they receive love. Like if they're just like, that doesn't come natural to me, that's too much work, I don't want to do, then that can, but yes, to your point, that doesn't mean just because there's a difference, there is a rift. So good point, good counter. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think but it does take thoughtful energy, right?
Exactly.
Like,
and that speaks to the commitment level of relationship. How long has the relationship been? How committed are you in this? How much do you want to make this work?
And just communication, right? That feedback. We also want to really reinforce when we know somebody else is trying, right? When word of affirmation is not the most natural thing to me, but I'm giving it to you, and then you saying like, "Oh my gosh, I know
you're trying.
That's exactly. So awesome, right? And that feels so good to me, and I love you for that, or whatever that is, right? So it's reciprocated. Great. Yeah.
Second question.
The second question is from our very own Marielle Butler.
Hi, Marielle.
Project manager, digital marketer for Shrink Tank. And she said, how would you recommend someone handle a situation where they are on a date with someone who has clearly lied on their profile? So you see you're on a date with somebody, they lied about their height, they lied about anything, and now you're on this date with them. How would you handle that situation?
That's a great question.
I've got a lot of thoughts, but do you have a...
I don't know if I've had to, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and I'm probably going to, I'm going to percolate.
Piggyback.
Yeah.
So for me, it depends. It's the same thing. Like if I'm going to have a disagreement with someone, is it worth the disagreement? Is it, like if it's a deal breaker, then maybe you kind of just let it go and you approach it from a more passive approach. Again, as a mental health professional, we tend to push more of an assertive and discuss in a healthy, and I think assertive sometimes has misconceptions. Assertive is not aggressive. Assertive is asking for what you want and need in a healthy and respectful way.
Yep.
You can address it directly. So we have this tendency to push towards, be direct, but to me, it's opportunity cost. Again, it's what are you getting out of that by being that straightforward? Is your goal to help that person not lie in the future? If that's your goal, then go for it. But if you're like, hey, definitely liar, not something I look for in a significant other, we're done, first and last date, or I can leave early, or I can figure it out. So I think it depends on what your true goal is.
What your goal is, what also is driving that lie for the other person. Like, is it an insecurity, or is it something that it's really, really vulnerable for them and they don't want to share necessarily until they really know that this has potential? Or I had an experience like that, and initially it put me off a little bit, but then once I understood, I was like, okay, this makes sense for the person. I think I would just have to collect some information about this person, and later on maybe I might address it depending on the values and how important that is.
Very good point. Right? I think it goes back to some of the advice that we talked about with the online dating. It's no one's perfect. So do you accept that flaw? And that's the question you have to ask yourself: is am I being too narrow or not? So you didn't jump on the coattails. You had your own perspective. That was good.
I did. Well, I just need a minute to think. So sometimes
you're buying time.
That's right. So thank you for jumping in. So. All right, everyone. So we're wrapping up, I think.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Tarik. I so appreciated this conversation
Appreciate
with you
you as well.
Always.
Thank you for the affirmation.
Absolutely, Tarik.